Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Here's what's at issue this week. The House of Commons has adjourned for the summer, but there's already talk of a cabinet shuffle in the coming weeks.
Will you shuffle your cabinet before the fall sitting?
I'm going into a cabinet meeting right now. We're going to have a lot of good work to do, and I have nothing to announce.
Radio-Canada has learned the groundwork for a cabinet change has been laid after a few difficult months for the government in an attempt to move some ministers struggling in portfolios and to send a signal to Canadians the government has not run out of steam. So, is there something that the Liberals can do or should do to demonstrate that they haven't been around too long and that they still have the ideas and energy needed to get the work done? Is a cabinet shuffle inevitable? Let's bring in our panelists, Chantal Hebert, Coyne and Althia Raj. Good to see you all. I'm not going to make you, say who's in, who's out. We're not going to do that. Don't worry, because I know you all would throw things at me. Yeah, but I will ask the question whether the government needs to demonstrate something to Canadians who do seem to think that they've just been around a long time and are a bit stuck. And what might that be, that tool, Chantal?
Possibly. Whether a cabinet shuffle is something that will work miracles as the mood for change sets in is very dubious. I've not seen very many cabinet shuffles result in a sea change in attitudes towards a government. Mm-hmm. Although it is good practice once in a while to kind of shake out your cabinet, but not for the reasons of coming back. I think many Liberals this week would say, well, maybe Canadians are getting tired of us, but they're still voting for us. We did okay in those by-elections. Our vote is resilient. So it isn't as if we are looking at a cabinet shuffle to save us from a huge peril. That might be a bit of a short read on the part of the Liberals, but still those by-election results worked out to be a narrative-busting event for the notion that the Liberals were going nowhere very, very fast.
Okay, and we're going to talk about the by-elections in the next segment, so don't go too far down that rabbit hole. And I should say that if you want to play the game of who's in and who's out of cabinet, please don't let me stop you. I just know you all very well, and it seems unlikely. So, Andrew, could a cabinet shuffle, I mean, sometimes that just presents a different image to Canadians, right? And sometimes that sort of just changes the way people, including the media, start talking about government. But is there something else that might be needed here?
Well, that's virtually all that cabinets and cabinet shuffles are good for, is presenting an image. If they really wanted to send a signal of change and invigoration, et cetera, they'd cut the cabinet in half. We don't need to have 40 cabinet ministers. The fact that we do tells you all you need to know about what cabinet has become. It's essentially for signaling to various demographics that you're on their side. It's hiring spokespeople who can present the government's message effectively, but it's not actually for ministers who will actually have serious responsibilities, serious roles, serious autonomy and independence. Cabinet shuffles give us in the media something to speculate about and show how in the know we are, but they don't actually, I agree with Chantal, I can't remember the last one that actually signaled something substantive and serious in terms of a change of direction. This government, I think, will be ill-disposed for the reasons Chantal suggested to take any bold steps because they have very little to lose and very little to gain. Voting patterns now are so entrenched, certainly between the right and the left, that there's not a lot to be gained for that. They can win elections, they can win minorities, as we've seen in the last two elections with 30-odd% of the vote. They've got 30% that simply won't desert them no matter what. And if they can govern again with the NDP support, why would they want to make any bold new ventures or take any chances?
Althia.
So I tend to see things a little bit differently.
Good.
I don't disagree with some of what Andrew said, but I do actually think we're going to have a much bigger cabinet shuffle than we've had in a long while. We really haven't had a cabinet shuffle since the last election because we only basically had a little bit of tinkering in last August. And yes, cabinet is all the things Andrew mentioned in terms of regional representation, and you keep members in cabinet who are reflective of certain communities. That might be good for fundraising. But at the end of the day, cabinet ministers are still in charge of their departments, and who you put in charge of your department can actually make a difference. Sean Fraser, for example, seems to be a much better or more productive immigration minister than immigration ministers that we had previously. So I think that we can't dismiss that part. The other part of making a cabinet is about caucus management. You have a lot of actually pretty competent people who ran in 2015 for Justin Trudeau, under the impression, probably for many, that they were going to make it into cabinet and haven't yet still. And they're getting a little impatient. And just to ensure that there is mobility in the ranks and that the caucus is happy, I think that that will be bigger than we expect. The trouble, though, is it's kind of hard to dump people once they have been in cabinet for a while. So unless they tell you they're walking out the door, it can be a little tricky. And lead to some unpleasantness, as we saw with Jody Wilson-Raybould or Mark Garneau.
Chantal.
So suppose, for speculation's sake, that Chrystia Freeland moves on to something else and there is a change at finance. That's a major change. It's a major cabinet shuffle. Suppose that all it is about is shuffling a few chairs to make caucus members happy and to dispose of Marco Mendicino, who's been having a hard time in his portfolio. That really is something that no Canadian is going to stop his or her vacation over to say, gee, this is a new government. It's now got energy. Marco is no longer around the cabinet table. Yes, some ministers make a difference. For instance, Stephen Guilbeault at Environment does make a difference to voting prospects for the government in Quebec, but that is where he is. So a lot of the current ministers who are strong, do you really want to replace Dominique Leblanc or shuffle him in a lesser role?
But nobody's suggesting that. There's still like 40 members that they can play with.
But what I'm trying to say is the question was, will it change the optics on the government? My take on this is if it's really substantial, yes, people will pay attention. But if they're shuffling a few chairs because they have talent in caucus, by the time those names are named, they may not be in government anymore.
We're trying to set the bar for when we're going to come in, really, during our summer holidays to talk about this, in part. Andrew, would prorogation do it? Would a throne speech be a more substantive message that there is something that needs to happen here? Or maybe none of these things are necessary. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we've seen them use prorogations before to get out of hot water, and they're in a bit of hot water right now, so that would be nervy. To try that again. I'm not sure you can use that, to get out of a public inquiry, but we shall see. No, look, there's two things that are really bedeviling them. One is the sense of drift and lack of direction. You know, they had bold plans in their first government, and they executed a lot of those. There's not been a lot of direction in the last couple of years. And secondly, just the sense that they're behind the eight ball. They're overwhelmed. They're you know, way behind on judicial appointments, on all kinds of things where it's just simply executing. And again, a large part of that is they're trying to run everything through the PMO, and you know, there's only so much that a half a dozen people can do.
Okay, 30 seconds or so to you, Althia, then we'll move on.
Well, I agree with that last part, but I think that there's still an opportunity in a cabinet shuffle to signal the things that you're trying to tell Canadians you care about. So, for example, housing. Housing has been a big issue. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has put that on the radar as an issue. The current housing minister, not the greatest communicator. If we have a cabinet shuffle and it's large, I would expect that Ahmed Hussein, unfortunately, gets another job, because you need to have somebody who can go toe-to-toe on the issues that the government says it cares about and hasn't successfully delivered on.
Welcome to another round of At Issue. This week saw Liberals and Conservatives hold 2 seats apiece in Monday's federal by-elections. With 4 seats up for grabs, early polls suggested a slump in Liberal support. But despite this, they were able to hold on to seats in Winnipeg South Centre and Notre-Dame-de-Grâce Westmount. For the Conservatives, they were able to hold on to Oxford and defeat PPC leader Maxime Bernier in Portage-Lisgar. So what should we read into these results? What do they tell us about the current political landscape and how parties maybe should adapt? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. Andrew, why don't you start us off? Should the Conservatives, let's start with the Conservatives, because we talked about the Liberals more in the first block. Should the Conservatives be happy, relieved, concerned about how these by-elections played out?
Very concerned, and I would couple them with the Mississauga Lakeshore by-election last December. You see a similar pattern in all of them, virtually all of them, where the Conservative vote is down. In a by-election, usually opposition parties do well in by-elections, but it's particularly the pattern here, which is they're on the one hand bleeding support to their left, to the center, Why do I say that? Because the support for the People's Party went down, which you would think would benefit the Tories, and yet the Tories' overall vote also went down in 3 of the 4 ridings. So that suggests that they're losing more votes to the Liberals than they're gaining from the People's Party. And equally concerning, I think, to them is that the NDP vote is down quite sharply. Now, there might be a lot of reasons for that, but one of them might well be if the political strategy for the Liberals is to scare NDP voters into voting Liberal because the Conservatives are so awful and so mean and so nasty. If you've got a leader who seems to validate those fears, that's going to help that strategy. So looking at these, as I say, in by-elections after the government had taken a pounding for the last several months, for them not to improve their standing, let alone to see their standing go down, has got to be very concerning.
So what do you say, Chantal, to people who say, well, it's just a by-election? Because that's certainly what Conservatives would say when you put some of those points to them.
Yeah, of course. And would they be saying that if they didn't prove their share of the vote? I mean, Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, held 15 by-elections in 1978 and came out with 2 and lost half a dozen
Yikes.
to the Conservatives. And a year later, he was out of government. That is what happens to governments who are at the end of their rope electorally. The share of the Liberal vote actually went up. What that tells me is it's not stop Liberals before you think you're so great. Mostly, Pierre Poilievre is convincing Liberals who are tired with their own party to come out and vote for their party. And as Andrew points out, he's also probably convincing New Democrat voters that they're better off voting for the stronger alternative to the Conservatives. I would call that a serious warning to the Conservatives and to Pierre Poilievre. At this rate, he is single-handedly fighting the mood for change and convincing people that while they may be tired of Justin Trudeau, they have not seen an alternative that they feel they can vote for.
And are Conservatives, are they concerned, Althia, from anyone that you're talking to or hearing from?
When they go out of their way to tell you that by-elections don't matter, yes, I would say they are concerned. There was an event on the Hill this week because one of our colleagues from the National Post, John Ivison, is leaving. And there were a lot of Conservatives there who made the point that by-elections don't matter and they're not at all concerned, unprompted. So that, I think, tells you what you need to know. I agree with everything that was said. I think that the decision that was made to basically go scorched earth in Portage-Lisgar, this is the riding where Maxime Bernier was running, where they had a candidate basically attend rallies talking about how he believes that there's only 2 genders, that he would never have voted on the bill that got unanimous consent under Erin O'Toole's leadership on conversion therapy, banning conversion therapy, where the Conservative Party used their own social media accounts to fuel the conspiracy theory on the World Economic Forum. This is this story percolating around the internet that suggests that the World Economic Forum is a world government, and along with the Trudeau cabinet, they want to strip you of your private property. Sometimes it's not just private property, it's they want to install microchips in your body or whatever. That the party would use its officials' account to perpetuate this kind of theory. And at the end of the day, no matter how many times they plastered through mailings pictures of Maxime Bernier walking in a pride parade suggesting how awful this was, the PPC still got 17% of the vote. So they wasted all this effort.
Right.
They hurt themselves. They gave the Liberals ammunition for the next election campaign. For what purpose? Maxime Bernier says he's not going anywhere. They did not destroy him, and they have hurt themselves everywhere else in return.
So yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, and then meanwhile, in Winnipeg South Centre, which is a gettable riding, I'm not saying they were likely to win it, but it's a riding that they have won in the past when they formed government. It's the kind of riding they need to win. They went from an 18-point margin of defeat just 2 years ago to a 32-point margin of defeat. I would be really worried if I was Conservative.
Well, they didn't even try in that riding. Yeah, Chantal.
Well, if you don't try in ridings that you win when you win, where do you try?
So is their priorities.
If the point is to kill the People's Party, I'm sure that can be achieved since those people used to vote Conservative, but that will not get you to government.
So, like, surely the strategy will change then, will it not? Given all the things that you're saying here, you would think that there would be a lesson, and then they would apply the lesson, and you know, Chantal.
I think those results, if the Conservatives want to, are a gift to the Conservatives, because they send the party and its leader a message that they can use to recast. There is enough time to do it.
Yeah,
if
for
they
sure.
choose to read that message, I think it could be a bad gift to the Liberals because it could make them think, oh, well,
Yeah.
we're okay.
Yeah,
Let's just keep going. Look, everything that happened all
Yeah.
spring had no impact. And that
Yeah.
would be really dangerous. So I've always believed that the party who did best on those by-elections was probably getting the more dangerous result, as opposed to the party who got that message. I'm not saying that I know that Pierre Poilievre will take that message and work with it, but it's a useful one to get with so many months before another election.
Andrew and Althia, both quickly.
The question is whether they will take that message. The people around Poilievre, like Poilievre, I think are very heavily invested in the idea that they know best, that we've tried the other way and it didn't work, that that's just mushy, mamby-pamby stuff. We got to give people the raw meat and get out the base. And whether they're capable of shifting from that strategy, I think is really an open question.
Well, and they seem very, very focused on the People's Party. I will say that as well. This is evidence of that too. Last word to you, Althia.
Well, I wonder if it will embolden some of the progressive conservatives that are in caucus who feel like they have lost their voice. Now they have something to point to when they make their arguments in caucus.
Okay, good conversation, everyone. So that's it. I'm freeing you temporarily for the summer. But
Unless there's a
keep your-
cabinet shuffle.
Yeah, keep your phones close to you. Sleep with
A
them.
big cabinet shuffle.
Okay. Message received. Thank you all very much. It's always good to have you here. And as I said, Adishu has now also adjourned. Not for the summer. We'll be back if there's big news. Otherwise, we'll take a couple months off. Thanks for watching. As always, we appreciate it.